Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions. It was just water. A glass of cold water. But the way she handed it to him, and not to me, felt like a knife between my ribs. It happened at the cabin, her family's so-called peaceful retreat. A weekend meant to clear the air after months of walking on emotional eggshells. I didn't want to go, but she insisted. Said it would be good for us. By us, she apparently meant her and him. His name was Ryder, her cousin's friend. New to the group, allegedly. But he walked into that cabin like he owned it, and her eyes followed him like a dog waiting for scraps. No one spoke about it. Not directly, but everyone saw. Even her sister, who gave me that awkward, "Are you okay?" glance while pretending to stir chili. The worst part? No betrayal had technically happened. No texts I could quote. No lipstick-stained collars. Just this unbearable closeness that didn't belong to me. She laughed too hard at his jokes. Touched his wrist when he talked. Defended him when I said I didn't like how he spoke to her. She told me I was jealous again and making something out of nothing. I stayed quiet. I always do. But the moment that broke me wasn't loud. It wasn't a fight. It was when he spilled his drink, and she rushed to grab him a towel and water, smiling like a giddy schoolgirl. I was sitting right there, empty glass in hand. She never even looked at me, and everyone at the table noticed. They looked down, pretended to keep chewing. Let the shame pass silently, because no one ever sides with the guy who's being replaced emotionally. Not until he screams. And I didn't scream. I waited. All through dinner. All through her laughing with him on the back porch. All through pretending I was okay. Until we got inside. And she said the worst thing yet. "You're overreacting. He was just being nice." That's when I said it. 6 words. Loud. Cold. Clear. Words that ended everything. She went to bed like nothing happened. After telling me I was overreacting. After laughing in Ryder's face while I sat there like an unpaid extra in my own life. She just walked upstairs, tied her hair up, and slipped under the covers like she hadn't shattered the last fragile piece of dignity I had left. I sat in the living room for hours. The fireplace had burned out, but my chest hadn't cooled. I wasn't angry the way you get when someone cuts you off in traffic. I was angry in that slow, drowning kind of way. The kind where you replay moments from months ago and realize this wasn't sudden. It had been building, and I missed it, or ignored it, because I wanted to believe in her more than I believed in myself. She used to whisper things like, "You're my safest place." Now, she talked to me like I was the reason her life wasn't exciting anymore. The shift was subtle at first, less eye contact, shorter replies, always on her phone. Then came the mockery, the sideways insults disguised as jokes. "Oh, Myles, you're such a worrier," she'd say in front of friends. "He's not exactly Mr. Spontaneous," she told her sister once, thinking I couldn't hear through the bathroom door. But I heard everything, and said nothing. That night, while she slept peacefully upstairs, I finally did something I hadn't done in months. I opened my own messages. Buried between credit card notifications and gym membership spam were texts from my brother, my college roommate, even my mom. People I had slowly pushed away because every ounce of energy I had was spent trying to make Mallory love me the way she used to. It wasn't until 2:13 a.m. that I heard footsteps. I thought it was her coming down to apologize. But it wasn't. It was Ryder. He had come in to grab a beer from the kitchen. Didn't expect me to be sitting in the dark like some tragic character from a slow burn novel. He looked surprised, then smug. "You good, man?" he asked, cracking open a bottle like he owned the place. I didn't answer. Just stared at him. And I swear, he smirked. Like he knew. Like they'd already crossed a line I hadn't confirmed yet. But he wasn't even trying to hide it. He walked past me and mumbled, "Didn't mean to step on your toes." Step on my toes? Like my marriage was a dance floor and he accidentally bumped me while cutting in? That was when I stood up. My legs were shaking, but not from fear. I followed him to the hallway and said it. 6 words that were sharp enough to break the illusion Mallory had spent months weaving. "I'm not your backup plan, Mallory." She was standing at the top of the stairs. She had heard it. I don't know if she had come down to get water or see what the noise was. But her face crumbled like a dam breaking. Not in guilt, not in sadness, but in panic. Because for the first time, I wasn't asking her what I had done wrong. I wasn't begging for attention or trying to be the bigger person. I was done. The silence that followed was louder than any screaming match we'd ever had. And just like that, everything shifted. What happened the next morning at the cabin would take the damage even further. What I saw changed how I viewed her forever. The next morning, I woke up on the couch with a stiff neck and a stomach full of regret. Not regret for what I said. Those 6 words had needed to be said for a long time. No, I regretted not saying them sooner. I regretted the years I spent apologizing for her coldness, pretending we were just going through a phase, when the truth had been dripping from her eyes and fingertips for months. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. I could hear birds chirping outside, someone moving around in the kitchen, the clink of a glass being set down. I sat up slowly, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle into my bones. But something felt wrong. Off. Like the kind of silence you get just before a fire alarm goes off. I stood, rubbed my eyes, and walked toward the hallway. Then I heard it, a low laugh. His. Ryder. That smug, greasy laugh that made my skin crawl. I paused. Then I heard her. Mallory. Talking softly. And I knew. I didn't have to hear the words. I didn't need to see anything. I just knew. You know that feeling when your stomach drops, like the floor beneath you just gave way? That's exactly what it felt like. But still, like the desperate fool I am, I kept walking. Slowly. Silently. Like a man walking into his own funeral, knowing the casket has already been carved. The kitchen came into view, and I stopped dead in my tracks. There they were, sitting at the table like they were in their own world. Ryder's hand was resting on hers. Not hidden, not discreet. Right there in the open. Like I was already gone. Mallory didn't even pull away when she saw me. She just looked at me like I had interrupted something private. Like I was the one out of place in my own story. Morning, she said casually, like I hadn't just walked in on the emotional equivalent of being stabbed in the chest. Ryder didn't say anything. He just leaned back in his chair, sipping his coffee, like he was waiting for me to explode. But I didn't. I just stood there, every nerve in my body screaming while my face stayed numb. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to demand an explanation. But what came out instead was a whisper. How long? That's all I could say. She blinked, looked down, then said, "We haven't done anything, Myles. It's just complicated." That word, complicated. That's the word people use when they're too cowardly to admit the damage they've caused. I felt something break in me. Not like a snap. More like a quiet tear. A slow rip you can't sew back. I didn't respond. I just turned, walked out of the kitchen, and went straight to the car. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get out before I said something I couldn't take back. I drove down the winding mountain road with tears in my eyes, my hands clenched so tight around the wheel I thought I'd snap it in two. And somewhere in that silence, my phone buzzed. A message from her. It said, "Please come back so we can talk. You're blowing this out of proportion." And that's when I realized she didn't see what she had done as betrayal. To her, I was still the overly emotional husband making a scene. To her, he was just a friend, and I was the inconvenience. She took his side, and she didn't regret it. I stared at her text for a long time. "Please come back so we can talk. You're blowing this out of proportion." That sentence didn't just hurt. It confirmed everything I'd been fearing for months. It wasn't just that she crossed a line with Ryder. It was that she saw me, my pain, my reaction, my truth, as an inconvenience. As if I were the unreasonable one for reacting like a man who just watched the last piece of his marriage shatter in his hands. I sat in the car at the bottom of the mountain road, parked behind a rundown diner with yellowed windows and an open sign that flickered like it wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Much like me. I typed and deleted dozens of replies. Angry ones. Begging ones. Ones that tried to make her understand how deeply she had failed me. But every time I paused. Because I knew nothing I said would reach her. Not anymore. Not the way things were. The woman who used to cry when I missed her calls now couldn't even admit she had emotionally replaced me. So instead, I typed 6 words. The ones that burned. The ones that didn't beg or scream. I hit send without reading it back. You chose him. Now live with it. And that was it. The final thread between us, cut cleanly in a single text. I didn't wait for her reply. I walked into the diner, ordered burnt coffee, and sat at a cracked booth trying not to collapse in public. That's when my phone buzzed again. She didn't say anything at first. Just sent, like she was stunned I had the nerve to stop chasing her. Then another message came. It read, "You're being cruel." Cruel? I laughed. Out loud. The waitress must have thought I was losing it. Maybe I was. But in that moment, I realized Mallory had rewritten the entire story in her head. She was the misunderstood wife. Ryder was the comforting friend. And me? I was the jealous, emotionally unstable husband who walked away from a harmless friendship. The next few hours were a blur. I ignored her calls. I didn't drive home. Instead, I called my friend Wes, who lived 2 towns over. We hadn't spoken in over a year. I told him everything. The silence on the other end lasted longer than I expected. Then he said, "You're coming here. Tonight. No excuses." When I arrived, I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood in his doorway holding a duffel bag full of clothes I'd packed months ago for a vacation Mallory canceled to stay late at work. Wes didn't ask questions. He just gave me a beer and turned on an old movie we used to watch in college. Around midnight, my phone lit up again. This time it wasn't just her. It was her sister, her best friend, even her mother. Mallory had started telling people I stormed off and refused to work on things. The narrative was shifting fast. I wasn't just the man she quietly discarded. I was now being recast as the villain in a story I hadn't written. But the worst part wasn't the lies. It was the fact that no one asked what she had done. And that's when it hit me. I had been invisible for far longer than I thought. What happened the next day would confirm it all and expose a plan I never saw coming. The morning after I sent that message, "You chose him. Now live with it." I woke up at Wes's place with my throat dry, my heart thudding like a warning I didn't yet understand. He'd let me crash on the couch, offered to call in sick just to keep me company, but I told him I'd be fine. I wasn't. But I said it anyway. That's what guys like me do. We lie to protect others from our pain while it eats us alive. I tried distracting myself with emails and nonsense work tasks on my phone, but I couldn't focus. I kept opening and closing her last message. "You're being cruel. Cruel. For walking away from her and Ryder. For not being the doormat she was used to." It was almost laughable. But then, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. A notification slid down my screen, one I'd never seen before. It was from a shared cloud drive we hadn't touched in months. Back when Mallory and I were still trying to organize our lives, we synced a folder with budgeting sheets, renovation photos, and random screenshots. And that morning, she must have forgotten it still existed. Because someone uploaded a screenshot straight to that folder. I tapped it out of instinct. It was from a group chat. The name of the group? Weekend Warriors Clinking Glasses. And it had Ryder, Mallory, her sister, her 2 closest friends, and at least 3 people I'd sat across from at dinner tables pretending everything was fine. The message was from the night before. It was a reply to Mallory's frantic texting about me walking out. Ryder wrote, "Told you he'd crack. Just keep pushing the narrative and play the victim. He's too emotional, it'll stick." Another message followed. "Don't worry, babe. They always take the woman's side anyway." And then came the one that sent a chill down my spine. "Mallory, he just needs to be the bad guy for a while. Then when it calms down, I'll spin it like he was unstable. It's cleaner that way." Cleaner. That word stuck in my teeth like poison. This wasn't just betrayal, it was orchestration. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't confused. She was laying groundwork, strategizing how to protect her image while painting me as the problem. I sat frozen, my hand trembling as I took screenshots, one after another, like my life depended on preserving this digital confession. Because in a way it did. I forwarded them all to a separate email, backed them up, and deleted the evidence from the shared drive. She still didn't know I had seen it. I wanted to scream, throw something, call her, and demand answers. But I didn't. I was done giving her reactions she could twist into proof of my instability. Instead, I called Wes into the room and said, "You're going to want to see this." 10 minutes later, his face was pale. He looked at me and said, "Dude, this isn't just messy. She's setting you up." And then he asked a question I wasn't ready for. What if she's already told her lawyer all this? I hadn't even thought about lawyers. Or divorce. I still hadn't let my heart catch up to what was happening. But that was the moment it clicked. This wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. It was about surviving a war I didn't even know I'd been drafted into. And the next move I made? It shocked even me. For the next 24 hours, I didn't respond to anything. Not her messages. Not her missed calls. Not the email from her mother asking me to come talk things out like an adult. I did nothing. But behind that silence, I was moving faster than I ever had in my life. I contacted a lawyer. A real one. Not a friend of a friend, or someone who owed Wes a favor. A professional. Someone who listened carefully, read the screenshots, and said something that chilled me to my core. She's not just painting you as unstable. She's preparing to flip the script completely. If you don't control the narrative now, you'll lose everything. That's when the fog finally cleared. She hadn't just fallen out of love. She'd premeditated a slow, quiet exit where she'd be the victim, the wounded wife, and I'd be the volatile husband no one could trust. I had to flip the narrative, not with anger, but with precision. So I called her. Just once. She answered on the second ring, her voice overly sweet, almost cautious, like she knew I was teetering on the edge. Myles, I've been so worried. Can we talk, please? I took a slow breath and said, of course. I'm not mad, Mallory. I just needed space. I heard the sigh of relief through the phone. Thank you. I knew you'd come around. I let her think that. I let her believe I was crawling back into my cage, that I was still the soft, whiny, overly emotional husband who would rather cry in a pillow than expose her. Meanwhile, I was printing everything, organizing the screenshots, backing up the photos. I even recorded our conversation, legally, in my state, because I knew whatever was coming next, I'd need every word. 2 days later, I asked if we could meet in public. I picked a quiet cafe downtown. She walked in looking perfect, like nothing had ever happened. Ryder wasn't with her, but his presence lingered in her energy. She sat across from me, all rehearsed concern and fake empathy. I just want to move forward peacefully, Myles, she said. We've both made mistakes. I asked what mistakes she thought I'd made. She blinked, like she hadn't prepared for that. I mean, emotionally shutting down, acting paranoid, leaving without warning. I nodded slowly, pretending to take it all in. You're right, I said. That must have been hard for you. Her shoulders relaxed. That's when she said it. I think we should handle this without dragging lawyers into it. We can split everything evenly. No need to complicate things. That line, no need to complicate things, was straight from the group chat. A perfect echo of what she told Ryder. She wanted me to stay quiet, to hand over half my life, walk away silently, and leave her with a clean image and no consequences. So I smiled, calm, unbothered, and slid a manila envelope across the table. What's this? She asked, already suspicious. Everything, I said. Screenshots, messages, voice recordings, and a letter from my attorney. Her face dropped. Color drained from her cheeks. She flipped through 2 pages before slamming the envelope shut. You're blackmailing me? No, I said. I'm protecting myself. And now, you can either work with me, or we do it the hard way, in court, where every fake tear and clever lie will unravel publicly. She didn't say a word for a full minute. Then she stood up and walked out. No hug, no parting shot, no drama, just silence. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, control. But she wasn't done. What she did next proved she was more dangerous than I thought. I thought it was over after the cafe. Thought handing her that envelope would force her to back down. Finally see that I wasn't the soft, gullible man she'd been molding for the past few years. But I underestimated how far someone will go when their image is at stake. Mallory wasn't just protecting a relationship with Ryder. She was protecting the carefully curated illusion of who she was to everyone else. The loyal wife, the victim of a failed marriage, the one who tried everything. 3 days after that meeting, I got served. Not by her directly. She wouldn't get her hands dirty, but through a third-party service. At my job, in front of my coworkers, I was humiliated. The folder was thin, but what it contained was explosive. She had filed for a restraining order, claimed I was unstable, that I had a history of emotional outbursts, that I made veiled threats at the cabin, that I'd followed her and Ryder. None of it was true. But it didn't have to be true. It just had to be believable enough to put me on the defensive. My lawyer called me within the hour. We're not just dealing with divorce now, she said. She's playing the long game. She wants to strip you down, your credibility, your job, maybe even your access to shared assets. She's weaponizing the system. I felt like I was suffocating. Every time I thought I'd taken a step forward, she knocked me back 5 more. And worst of all, people were starting to believe her. A mutual friend texted me saying, I hope you get the help you need, man. Another one asked if I had really snapped at the cabin. The smear campaign was spreading faster than I could keep up with, and I realized what Mallory was doing wasn't just self-preservation. It was character assassination. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I had already sent the contents of that group chat to someone else. Her company's HR department. You see, Ryder wasn't just her emotional crutch, he was her coworker. And not just a colleague. He was her direct supervisor. The chat messages proved inappropriate conduct, favoritism, and potential HR violations. I hadn't planned to use it. Not until she went nuclear. But now, I had no choice. I sent everything. No commentary. Just a time-stamped digital trail of their affair, her manipulation, and his involvement. Within 48 hours, I got word back. Ryder had been suspended pending an investigation. And Mallory? She was placed on administrative leave. The narrative she was spinning began to crack. Suddenly, she wasn't the poor, misunderstood wife. She was the employee under scrutiny for an unethical relationship that threatened her company's reputation. And just like that, the tide started to turn. But even as her walls began to collapse, she made one final, desperate attempt to regain control. She showed up at Wes's house. Uninvited. She stood outside, looking disheveled. No makeup, hair pulled into a tight bun like she was trying to project innocence. I watched through the window as she knocked once, then again. I didn't move. But Wes opened the door. "Is he here?" she asked, her voice low, calculated. Wes stepped aside slightly. "What do you want, Mallory?" "I just want to talk. Please. I don't want this to get worse." I walked to the door, but didn't step outside. I stayed in the shadows, just enough for her to know I was there. She looked right past Wes, eyes locking with mine. "I miss you," she said. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't an apology. It was bait. A trap dressed in nostalgia. And I wasn't falling for it. What I said next would make her mask finally crack. Mallory stood outside that night like the world had fallen apart around her. And in a way it had. But not because of what I had done. Her carefully crafted version of reality was crumbling. Ryder was under investigation. Her job was slipping through her fingers. Her lies were unraveling, thread by thread. And now, the last card she had left to play was the oldest one in the deck, pity. But I didn't move. I stood behind Wes, arms crossed, completely still, watching her try to act like the past 3 weeks hadn't happened. Like the group chat didn't exist. Like she hadn't tried to make me the villain in a story she wrote herself. "I miss you," she said again, voice trembling just enough to seem believable. "I know I've made mistakes, but we've been through so much. Doesn't that count for anything?" That's when I stepped forward, not to take her hand, but to say what I should have said a year ago. "It counts," I said quietly. "It counts as experience. The kind I'll never repeat." She blinked, her lips parting like she wanted to cry or scream, or maybe both. But I didn't wait. I gave Wes a look, and he slowly closed the door between us. It wasn't slammed. It didn't need to be. It clicked softly, but to me, it sounded like freedom. I didn't cry afterward. I didn't even shake. I sat down on Wes's couch, exhaled for what felt like the first time in months, and realized that losing her wasn't a tragedy. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. A few weeks later, the legal mess started to clear. Her false claims fell apart once her texts were exposed. Ryder was fired. She resigned before her company could formally terminate her. She tried reaching out a few more times, through mutual friends, vague posts, even a handwritten letter left in my mailbox. I didn't reply, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing closure. I was the closure. I started therapy, reconnected with people I'd pushed away, picked up my guitar again, and slowly, piece by piece, I began building a life that wasn't centered around being enough for someone else. It was mine, and it was quiet, but it was real. And every time I think back to that moment at the cabin, when she poured him a glass of water and left me sitting there like I didn't exist, I remind myself how far I've come. I'm no longer a background character in someone else's story. I'm finally the main character in my own. Thanks for watching Reddit Confessions. If you've ever experienced someone rewriting your reality or pulling a fake apology just to protect themselves, share your story in the comments. What moment from this story hit you the hardest? And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.